This is the Elite Bootcamp, and it's Elite. I have an acronym for all my Elite programs and courses, but this one is meant specifically for test prep. So it is exactly to do what it says. Engage you in core concepts. I want you to learn some effective strategies. I want to integrate some of the knowledge you already have and some of the knowledge you're going to learn over this next few days so you can use it in a practical sense. We're going to target key exam areas. Pretty much most of the information you guys might say, oh, I heard this question was on here, this is on here. We can share it or you can put it in the chat, but I don't want to distract the overall group because we have LMSWs and LCSWs. So the content's the same, but how the questions are worded and how much in depth we need to go depends on what test you're taking. So we'll go over some of those things. I'm telling you, if you follow along, this bootcamp is going to let you know at the end of it, like, hey, I'm ready to test. I feel good. I feel confident. Or, woo, baby, I need to go back to the drawing board and start studying. I need to do something. So I've had a mixed review of people who've done it. Some people have done it right afterwards. I would say has been a very, very good success rate for those who take an exam directly after this. Normally, they're taking it within like a week. Some people were taking it within that week. Some people took it like within 2 weeks. I do have some people that waited a while. I just feel like the content's so fresh, you want to do it within 30 days. That's why I always emphasize that. So this is a tech tip. This is something that I want you guys to all know. You can either have a second phone or a device, or if you're in your laptop. If you don't have one, don't worry. You could always click on the top of your computer and use a separate web browser. But I do activities and other things that's going to require you to use like a separate link or a separate tab so you'll have access to it. So definitely make sure you're able to you have access to that, whether it's an extra phone, tablet, even if you're on your laptop or something, just use an extra web browser. All right. And basically, there's no downloads needed. So if you want to participate and use the workbook or do the activity, honestly, I wanted to use the workbook throughout, but with time, we really don't have time to go through the workbook. What I suggest you guys do, though, with the workbook is afterwards. So like tonight, whenever we finish the content area that we're going over, if you have time this evening or tomorrow morning or like during a break, you can do the activities in the workbook to really make sure you hone in and you understand the content that we have already reviewed. If that's not something you're able to do, definitely do it after the boot camp. You still have the workbook, work through it and use it as activities just to make sure you're learning and you understand the concepts and things we went over. And then you can always go back to the replays and check and review it to make sure you got what you need. So vision and intention, I'm really big on that. I think this is a big weekend. We have a lot of content, a lot of things we're going over, and that's important. But those of you that missed about 1 point, 2 point, 3 points is not really studying more and focusing more and learning more. It's really about being intentional and kind of visualizing yourself at this point passing. So basically, I want you guys to think about it. You can put this in your workbook. It's probably the first page in the workbook. For those of you that have it and downloaded it, if you don't raise your hand. Don't put it in the chat about the workbook. We'll help you get to it during the break. We'll talk about it another time. But right now, just write on a sheet of paper, like a little sticky. I have affirmations. I have like cards that my husband's giving me, my kids like in front of me. I have like a picture of my grandma, like just different stuff that kind of keeps me going and keeps, me with some type of inspiration. So basically the question is, what will passing this exam do for your life, your future, and your family? So just kind of thinking about that for a little bit, what would that do? And you can just actually write it on a note card. And this is kind of like your why. I just want you to take a moment to reflect on that. Again, just write it somewhere or have it, or just write on a sheet of paper, whatever it is, just your why. Because when you get stressed or you're going over material this weekend and you're like, oh my God, I didn't know that. Or, oh my goodness, I need to know this. And you're stressing out, or you're like, or maybe it's the opposite. You're like, look, I'm getting this all right. I'm so ready. I'm ready. Look at your why. That's your motivation to keep going, especially when things are tough. And also when you celebrate and pass, you just want to know why you're doing it and remind yourself as such. All right. This is not a lecture. It's more of a coaching experience. So participate fully, ask questions. I want you to make this your own space. Here is the exam overview. This is also in your workbooks, so you can see it later on, because I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly. Basically, for those of you who have not taken a test, I'm assuming most of you guys have or have some experience taking it. There are 170 questions, 150 are scored, 20 are unscored. You have 4 hours to take the test. A lot of you on this call, I know if you've been taking the test multiple times, you likely have a waiver or have additional time or something. So maybe that 4-hour slot is not what you have, but that's what the majority of people have. And you have the 2 sections. So you have 85 questions, then you get that mandatory 10-minute break. You cannot go back after that 10-minute break. I've had a lot of people reach out to me. They learned the hard way. They thought they can go back after the break. They didn't finish all the questions. They missed a whole bunch, like all of that stuff. So make sure you're prepared on the front end and kind of know what to expect when you go into the exam site. My strategy is 90 seconds per question. Even when I do questions, and those of you that get private tutoring from me or have done some type of coaching program or anything, you know that I pretty much time you guys when you do questions, because I really want you to get used to knowing that you need to know the answer and move on. So the only issue I have with those that have waivers. I get it because it's anxiety and you feel like the time is stressing you out, but I still want you to answer the question the same way. Still stick with 90 seconds and go forward. Yes, you might have more time, but sometimes more time allows you to overthink and then change answers and then second guess and then you fixing it. So that's not a great thing when you have time and you're not using it the way it's meant to be used. And that's for you just not to feel like you're racing the clock and have your anxiety heightened. Now, let's see. So there are different types of questions. You have recall, reasoning, and application. But when it comes to this test, 65% is 4-option multiple choice, and then 35% is 3 options. So you'll see that pretty much when you're taking the test. Some people are like, I had a whole bunch of 3-question options. I had a whole bunch of 4-question options. So that is what you want to consider and just kind of be aware that that is what you have. Case studies and situational judgment. You want to think with clinical judgment, especially my LCSWs. This more applies to you guys. Like, what is the best intervention in this scenario? You're coming with clinical reasoning when you're answering these questions. The exam encourages concept clustering. So you got to know your theory groups. You got to know your clusters, your intervention families, all of that good stuff. And we're going to be touching on pretty much all of it. So this is just a recap of what to expect and what's on the exam. All right, the scoring. Most of you know is either pass or fail. It's also a computerized adaptive test, which is CAT, meaning the better you do, the harder the questions get. Most people hate that. I said, that's a good thing. You do well, they get a little bit more intense and, you know, it helps with the scoring and all that good stuff. So that's a good thing. And also you want to remember that you only score based on what you get right. So it doesn't score you if you get something wrong. So if you get something wrong, most people are stressed like, oh, I missed it. No, when you have a test that has 150 questions, some people reach out and they're like, oh my goodness, I missed it by 5 points or I missed it by 6. I'm honest, I missed it by 1 point and someone checked me real hard with that 1 point. It was like, you had to miss a whole lot more to get to that 1 point. And I was like, okay, thank you. Like it felt at that moment, it made me feel like I didn't understand it for years. Literally, we're talking over a decade ago. And I was in my feelings like, how could he say that? That was 1 point. But now in the process of working with people and years of supervising people and seeing people go through the test, there are 150 questions. So if you get to 100 or 97 or 96 or 95, you've already missed 50 off the jump. So there's a lot of points that are out there that you can gain more knowledge and more insight on to kind of strengthen the likelihood of you passing. So for those of you that are less than 10 points away, which a majority of you on here, if you're retesting, it doesn't mean like, oh my God, I don't know enough. It just means like, hey, you have options on what you study. I like to look at it and say, if I came 10 points short, I'm taking this exam, I'm gonna look at my scores. And if I'm like, ooh, I did human development, I could get some points there. I didn't realize I scored that low, but I like the content there. I'll just focus on human development and don't worry about the other sections. You know, do it from time to time and do questions, but I'm not going to bombard myself with everything. And like I'm starting from the beginning. And that's what a lot of people do when they don't pass or they miss a few points. They go back to the drawing board and start all over again. And it's also the Prometric Testing Center. So that's basically just testing sites. That's what that means. That's what it's referencing or talking about. All right, exam content areas. Real quick, LCSWs, this is for you. 24% for human development, 30% for assessment, diagnosis, and treatment planning. Psychotherapy, clinical interventions, 27%, and your ethics, 19%. Your LMSWs, 27 human development. They're pretty much even. For this exam, 24%, 24, and 25. So for this presentation, we're going to go over a lot of clinical, the clinical intervention section. I do have some things that we're going to go over this client intervention related. The main difference in that is that for LMSWs, you're not actually doing the therapy or doing the clinical work per se. So it's just worded differently in the type of interventions that you do. But the content and information you still need to know. And you'll see that as we go through that section. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI integration is all throughout the exam. So if you notice the ASWB, if you've taken it, some of you guys said you took it last year or you've taken it before and now you're retesting, a lot of it has removed those biases or those microaggressions. So you don't really hear like the 44-year-old African-American female that blah, 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 or you don't really hear like the husband and wife were in session, They don't really give context in a lot of questions, letting you know, because they want to include everyone. So it could be a same-sex couple. It could be a white female, an Indian female. Like they don't want to put labels and kind of use those terminologies like they once did. So that's what that means. There's a huge emphasis on cultural humility, and we're going to talk about that, as well as anti-oppressive frameworks and trauma-informed care. A lot of that is throughout the exam in questions and wordings and how we actually handle the information. All right, this is the LMSW and LCSW comparison, because I always get people say, oh, you know, the course is geared towards LCSWs. How can I do that? You know, this, I've had a lot of LMSWs that I've worked with that have came to me before I even started doing any of this stuff that I would just tutor and support that did LMSW. LMSWs. And now we do have an LMSW coach, 2 of them actually. One will be doing individuals and the other one will be doing groups. So my LMSWs will be getting a lot of extra support. The reason why I'm doing that is because I realized that LMSWs don't have any formalized supervision or experience like the LMSWs, at least at the LCSW level. Even though the test is more harder, more complex and difficult in certain areas, you still have had 2 to 4 years in supervision to kind of prepare and learn about that process versus LMSWs. They just graduate from college and realize they have this exam to take. And a lot of times it can be kind of confusing if you haven't had that formalized training or support. All right. So this is pretty much just a comparison chart. You guys, I believe this is also in a workbook, so you don't have to copy it, just to have knowledge. So this is just an example of maybe how LMSW question will look versus an LCSW question. Hey guys, I stopped by to tell you this. You do not have to win alone. Absolutely not. People in the community are winning each and every day. The proof is in the pudding. Go in the community. It's free. We're throwing down test questions, case studies, the F.N.B.M method, all the details and everything you need so you can succeed. Click the link in the bio and join. You don't need to do this alone. See you soon. And I'm going to just demonstrate real quick. For those of you who have not taken the exam before, I just want you guys to know that you can always go to the ASWB website. It's aswb.org. If you have not taken an exam before, or don't have any idea what this test looks like, or have experience, using this system, if you can raise your hand, because I don't want to go over it if you guys all are familiar with it. So is anybody unfamiliar with what I'm showing and like what is, or you have an idea of how to actually use this site? So we're not going to go over that, but if you do need the website, just go there. Some people are new to this, so to actually allow you to go here and do a login to your online practice test. For those of you that are taking the online practice test or purchase it, but it also gives you a demo. You can actually go through it and actually do a demo of what it feels like to be in the testing site and flag questions and highlight them and all that good stuff. All right, so today, just to kind of go through what it's going to look like, what we're going to be covering. All right, so we're going to go over some test taking strategies, some tips. That is pretty much the last day on Sunday where we take a deep dive and go into it a little bit more, but we're going to be doing lots of questions. So I still want you guys to have some ideas or some strategies in the process of answering these questions. Consider time management, even when we do quizzes. I've had some people do a quiz and I can see some of the tools that I use. I can see how many people out of it's 30, like 37, like say 35 people up here. I'll do a quiz and I'll see that 17 people participated and answered the question. And then I'm like, I don't know if the other 17 went to the bathroom or they're taking a break, but I'm using this to time you guys. So when we do the activities and you step away, you might just want to put in the chat or something that, hey, I'm stepping away, so I'm not waiting, because that slows down the process. Just want to kind of let you guys know that, because I do use the time management piece. All right, we want to break down the questions. You want to read the stem first, highlight any keywords, eliminate any distractions. You want to reduce choices with logic. Like, we don't want to just reduce things and say this is not the right answer. You want to logically know why you're not doing it. So a lot of times when I ask you guys a question or you pick an answer, it looks great and it might be right, but I want to know why you're picking that. Like, what information do you have is leading you to answer this question that way? Mindset control. I'm really, really big on mindset. I feel like you need to visualize your success. You need to breathe, figure out a way not to panic. For all of you that are on here, at least 90% of you are overthinkers and stressed out completely about taking the test. No matter how prepared you are, you're just a nervous wreck, especially if you've taken it before. All you can think about is, what if that test says fail again, or I don't pass? And that is taking over your process in getting to where you need to be. You have to start visualizing yourself succeeding. All right. And then you also have the pretest awareness. You won't know, this is in the exam, but you don't know which 20 questions don't count. So you want to treat every question like it matters, no matter what, when you're doing a question for the exam. You want to know the big 3, the DSM-5, the NASW Code of Ethics, and those core intervention models. You want to have an understanding of that. And again, I'm going back to mindset. You got this. You got to stay calm and you have to stay confident. Use this to gauge where you are and just the areas that you might need to hone in and improve on. All right. Final reminders. Unmute. You can ask questions. You can drop nuggets, share your thoughts, all of that stuff in the chat. Take time, let things to sink in before you rush. A lot of times people ask questions, but if they just paid attention to what was going over or kind of just thought things through or taking a chance to kind of review their notes, is right there. And they're like, oh, wait, I got it. So just be mindful of that. I definitely don't mind you guys asking questions and getting clarity on certain topics, because if you're thinking it, trust me, there's somebody else on the call that might be thinking it as well. So I'm okay with that. I just don't wanting you guys to like jump in and unmute and say, I have a question, like right in the middle of me presenting a certain slide or going over something, because it can just be distracting for those that are following along in the way. But I do ask you guys if you have questions. So at that time you can ask or just raise your hand and I know to come to you when it comes to a break within the presentation. So here we're going to start with ethics. For those of you who just jumped on, because I think someone had to jump on or jump off, don't forget it's recorded so you'll be able to see. So basically when it comes to ethics, your job isn't just to know the code. It's really like, as a professional, you want to kind of understand how to apply this code. You know, some people have said, I'm going to study my NASW Code of Ethics. And I'm like, that's great. I've never studied the code, like sat there like a book and read it in its entirety, but I've studied major sections of it and I use a highlighter and I kind of remember and know certain parts of it. So if you are one of those individuals that feel like I need to know everything ethics, this is kind of like a condensed version. I know I made the joke and I was saying that if you're part of the course, but this honestly is kind of like, I always say the course on steroids. The courses gives you a slower pace and you're able to take your time going through it. This is just really fast, but it's covering about 50 to 75% that would be in the course. The course is just maybe a little overloaded with other things like, you know, fancy cheat sheets and other stuff. All right. So of course, ethics to me is one of the most important things because it is heavily tested. You see it all the time on questions. Sometimes people don't even know that it is an ethics question. So hopefully at the end of this, you're able to identify what that looks like. Questions that test self-determination, boundaries, competence, confidentiality, all those are ethics related questions. And what I want you to do by the end of this is know how to avoid those common traps and those missteps. So sometimes you'll get questions about those dual relationships. Gift giving comes up and everyone still asks the same question. When can you accept the gift? When you can't? Can we barter? Can we not? Like some of this stuff we know and we still ask the same thing. So hopefully throughout this presentation, you have more clarity and know how to apply it and what you do in those given situations. All right. As I share, these are pretty much some of the domains that you'll go over in the ethics section. It's about 25% on the LMSW and 19% on the LCSW. But those of you who watch my video 2026, you know the exam is changing. They're actually trying to look at doing just 3 sections. My thought is they're going to do like assessment and clinical interventions is one section, and then ethics will be one, and then human development will be another, which means that ethics is likely going to be like 33%, or at least for the LCSW, maybe 25% or more, and then the same for the LMSW. So ethics is definitely something we can't run from. Many of you are testing this year, so you're like, whoo, I'm just going to pass this test and be done with it. However, a lot of you LCSWs are going to wind up supervising or managing people or working in agencies where you're going to have these clinical director roles and responsibilities where it's going to really require you to know a thing. So really make sure you understand your ethics. And even when you do pass, guys, this is something that you want to just continue to pick up and review and go over, just like your DSM. So we're going to go over some of those questions at the end where I want to see if you can use first, next, best, most, and how that actually applies to ethics. But let's talk about these code sections that you must know. That is service. Service is helping people in need. We always put clients first. Social justice, we challenge situations and circumstances where there's some injustice, and we always promote equality. Those are the things that we do as social workers. Dignity and worth of a person, we respect every person, regardless of their race, religion, sex, or whatever it is. Everyone has an inherent value, and we have to understand that. That is what dignity and worth of a person stands for when you look at these core values. Importance of human relationships. Relationships are central to healing and change. So it's really important as social workers that we understand the importance of these human connections that our clients have, as well as what we have as it pertains to us working with our client. Integrity. Be honest and responsible in all areas of practice. Integrity, basically, we can narrow it down. It says it means you're doing the right thing regardless of who's looking. So if you wouldn't do the same thing when somebody's looking, then you don't want to do the same thing when they're not looking. That is integrity, being honest and responsible at all times. And incompetence. Stay within your scope. You know, if you don't know a thing or don't understand it, that's what CEUs are for. That is what supervision is for. That is what taking on and doing some additional education to make sure that you're competent and you're knowledgeable in certain areas. All right. If a value is being challenged in a question, you choose answers that protect or restore that value. That's just a way of thinking about it. So if you have a test question and it's challenging the value of someone or the value of maybe a program or intervention or whatever you're doing, you want to choose the response that's always going to protect or restore that specific value that's being challenged or questioned. All right. So when we talk about social workers' ethical responsibilities to client, that's it. We promote client self-determination. We provide informed consent. We maintain confidentiality. And when we say maintaining confidentiality, there are times when we can break confidentiality. So we'll get to that. So we're supposed to maintain it, but there are situations and circumstances where you have to just violate, or not violate, but actually dismiss that and actually break confidentiality when it pertains to the clients. All right. And then we have avoid dual relationships and conflicts of interest. This comes up a lot on exams, whether it's you're working with a client and you realize that the client comes in for intake and you realize it's your third cousin, or, you've been working with a client and you realize that it's your best friend's boyfriend's sister, or, you're working with a client and, you realize that they're actually in your child's class, or they attend your church and you teach children's ministry. Like, it's bound to happen, but there's certain ways that we have to handle dual relationships. And you also want to ensure competence, culturally aware, and being respectful of services that we provide to our clients. And handle termination appropriately. It's super important that clients understand that they're being terminated. They understand what to do once they're being terminated. And we've given them the tools or the support needed so they can be successful in that termination process. So again, remember, if you get questions about confidentiality, boundaries, or self-determination, they often relate to this standard: social workers' ethical responsibilities to client. That's pretty much what that stands for. So let's move on to number 2, which is social workers' ethical responsibility to colleagues. Now, again, we have several scenarios and questions that we'll provide at the end to kind of address these situations as they come up. So the first one is treat colleagues with respect and integrity, collaborate and consult when appropriate, avoid undermining others or spreading gossip, address unethical behaviors, and maintain boundaries. All right, so social workers' ethical responsibilities in practice settings. We want to maintain clear role boundaries. That is a huge one, knowing your role and what your responsibilities are in that setting. Follow proper documentation and billing procedures, supervise appropriately and ethically, and advocate for adequate resources for clients. And through this whole process, we want to uphold transparency in organizational operations. So basically what that's saying is that if you're working in an organization or working at a certain job, that you're pretty transparent, that we're going to uphold the responsibilities and our code of ethics and actually how we participate and do things within that practice. And this deals with private practice, agencies, or any type of institutional roles that we might have. All right, so social workers' ethical responsibilities as professionals. We're supposed to maintain competence through ongoing education. I told you guys, CEUs, whatever you need to do to make sure you're staying abreast. I have a lot of people who passed the exam and they still are part of the community. They're still a part of the channel, whether they're LCSWs. If they're LMSWs, it makes perfect sense because they're planning to go forward with the LCSW. But a lot of LCSWs do as well because there's so much information. We just don't know it all. So the reason a lot of the information and content that I go over, some of the stuff is second nature, some of the stuff I don't know. I'll tell you guys in a heartbeat, there's a lot of stuff that I don't know offhand. I have to research, figure it out. The stuff that I do know, it just comes from years of doing this. I've been licensed for almost a decade and a half, and I've been supervising for over a decade. So I've been having to go over this with a lot of people over and over and find ways to simplify it and have them be able to understand in a way that they can share it back to me or actually apply it in their practice. All right. Social workers' ethical responsibilities to the social work profession. We have to contribute to the knowledge base of the profession. We have to uphold ethical standards. We practice research, teaching, and practice advancement, and we mentor and guide all those new professionals. So you guys know that's a part of a responsibility of ours. So once you get licensed, don't be like, look, I'm licensed. I don't have no time to be helping them. They need to do what I did and get a course. You still want to help them and provide support and guidance, or just give them a direction of where they need to go. All right. 6, social workers' ethical responsibilities to the broader society. We want to promote social justice. As you know, there's lots of questions on social injustice, and we have to promote social justice. We advocate for policy change. We address issues like racism, poverty, oppression, all of that kind of stuff. And then we also want to support vulnerable and marginalized population. That comes up a lot. Many a times you get a test question and it's asking you about, maybe it's an elderly client that lives with a child, the child's speaking over them, or they look scared, whatever it is, that is considered a vulnerable population that we have to make sure that we support and we provide guidance and give them what they need to make sure that they're safe and okay. So here are some common ethical issues that you're likely to see on the exam. So do relationships. An example would be a former client wants to be a friend. What do? Here it says avoid if the risk is objectivity or harm. So if it's going to be something where you're not really sure, it's uncomfortable, you just don't do it. It's a friend, you work with the client in some kind of capacity, you can just let them know nicely that due to the nature of your previous working relationship or how it was, it's just not something that's allowed in your profession, or, however you can say it in a nice way. But that would be the case. Bartering. A client offers haircuts for sessions. It's only appropriate if it's culturally appropriate, and that depends on the area. A lot of rural areas, people do barter thing. One of my favorite TV shows, I use that example. I don't know if you guys watch Netflix or heard of this show called Virgin River on Netflix. But anyways, a TV show called Virgin Rivers. There's another one called Sweet Magnolias. And I use those two examples because they are small country towns where everybody loves everybody. Everybody connects with everybody. I mean, somebody has something wrong. They're like, oh, here goes the keys to my house. You can stay there. And I'm like, whoa, like they're just super uber friendly. They connect. So in those situations, there's one town doctor, there's one town lawyer, there's probably one town therapist. So everyone knows everyone. So there are likelihood that there might be some bartering going on. Like, hey, you're mowing my lawn and doing this, and in the place you might have a session or see them at the local clinic. There are things that happen in certain situations, but you want to make sure it's culturally appropriate for whatever area we're talking about and that there's no exploitation. Gifts. A client offers homemade food, and it's only if it's low value, culturally appropriate, document it. So you don't want to just, if a client makes you the food and they say, hey, and they bring it into the session, normally that's not a problem. It's not something that they spent hundreds of dollars on. It's not something that's going to probably be problematic. But one of the things you want to do whenever a client gives you a gift, you want to know the intention behind it. Like what was their intention in giving you this gift? That's something you want to process in that session in a moment. All right. Confidentiality. A teen discloses pregnancy. Situations come up like this all the time on the exam and just in your test prep journey. You want to maintain confidentiality unless there is some harm being done or that law specifically in that state requires disclosure. I don't know what state that would, but if a client is pregnant and she shared that with you, you could always encourage her to tell her family or someone, make sure she's getting appropriate treatment or whatever it is, but it's not your right just to break confidentiality and go run and tell her parents. So that's not something that we do. All right. A client threatens to harm themselves. You want to document it thoroughly and notify whoever is required. So maybe they need to be hospitalized. They might need to have a TDO. We call that as a temporary detainment order here. And that's called a TDO if a client is not in a right state of mind or wanting to harm themselves, where you can actually have them like involuntarily hospitalized. So that's what it means when it says notify as required. Notify the police, notify an emergency contact, whomever it is. If a client's threatening to hurt themselves or to hurt someone else, that's what we need to do. Advocacy. The client is discriminated at work. We would empower them. We'll offer some type of support navigation system. We're going to help them in that moment. We're not just going to say, oh yeah, that must be tough. You have a terrible job. Let's find another job. Like you want to help and give them the tools so they feel empowered enough to address it with whom they work with. All right, guys, real quick. I'm always talking about the community, the LCSW Vibes. We leveling up. And this is the sneak peek of the community. As you can see, it's on and popping. We got a lot happening. I got ethics over here, human development, or study guides that you guys asked me about on the YouTube channels, all right there. Test questions. You just want to level up and learn and see if you can answer those questions. I'm testing your knowledge. Let me go back to the home screen. If you want to learn more about what services I offer and what other things are there, that is where you go to the learning tabs. We leveling up, so why don't you join so you can level up too. All right, some common ethics scenarios. This is like a quick reference guide. Again, remember you guys have a lot of reference sheets in the supplemental tools that you guys have. So scenario, if there's a duty to warn, assess immediacy of the threat, notify the intended victim authorities, you breach confidentiality without needing to do any type of assessment or anything, because this is somebody that is you have the duty to warn. So these are just kind of examples of where I want you to look at this. It's kind of like if it's a situation that has suicide client, assess for immediate risk. The next thing you would do is create a safety plan or initiate hold. As you can see, this is like first and next style. So if you get a question, it's like, what do you do first? You have a client that's offering a gift. First thing they're doing is considering the value and the timing of it. And then you always want to discuss the meaning with the client. You don't automatically accept or automatically reject it. You want to kind of look at the context of it. Because some people see that and they automatically, I can't accept the gift from a client. And that's an easy point that you missed because you didn't read the whole context of it. Subpoena for records, assert privilege, consult with the client or attorney, release records without authorization. So you guys know when there is a subpoena, we're consulting. I think I just did the video on that and redid it because it was an error in there. So you want to make sure you consult with the attorney and the client. All right. Boundary crossing, assess impact of treatment, document and consult with your supervisor. That's like a client crossing a boundary or doing something that's not appropriate. Or when we say crossing the boundary, maybe you are their worker and you're doing therapy with them or whatever your role is, but they're crossing over and expecting more things from you. or asking things that is not therapeutically appropriate, and that's kind of like crossing the boundary. That's what that means. Cultural conflict, you always want to acknowledge and seek cultural consultation. Remember, you are not the expert in that client's culture, so you want them to elaborate, educate you on their culture, and kind of explain to you some things. Social media requests, you want to deny any requests, because that happens a lot when you get requests from clients and you just want to deny them, and you want to address it in the next session. Like, hey, I saw that you tried to friend me on Facebook. Unfortunately, due to our role and I'm unable to accept it, just kind of letting them know. Another thing is mandatory reporting. You always assess if something is reportable, because sometimes the social workers, we report stuff that does not need to be reported. And sometimes we don't report stuff that really should be reported. So you really want to have an understanding, that context of when to report something. Going back to the colleague misconduct, of course, we'll have some questions and scenarios on that, but that's pretty much like a client, or you notice your coworker is saying they saw clients and they weren't, or the coworker is being loud or rude towards a client, or they're showing up to the staff meetings late and not documenting what they did or how they did something, like things like that. There are times when mandatory reporting of a colleague skips over to go to the supervisor directly. That's something that people get confused about. So it's pretty much if there's any abuse, any type of fraud, and when I say abuse, towards the client or towards someone else, any type of fraudulent activity, like they're saying they did notes or documents and they didn't do it and they're actually submitting it, because you got billing companies, you have all types of people who get involved when you're billing things that are not right. So in those cases, you want to go directly to the supervisor. Now, if your supervisor is doing something unethical and you have it on the test question, normally that is where you consult in the NASW board. Your supervisor is your supervisor. I don't know who you're going to report in the agency. So normally it takes it a step higher, and that's the NASW. All right, termination. You always want to assess a client's readiness to be terminated and have a plan for them and how that looks when that process is done with. All right, confidentiality and limits. Confidentiality is not absolute. Break it only when. So this is when you can't break confidentiality. Risk of harm to self or others. You have the duty to protect. Mandated reporting. That's child or elder abuse. If it's a court order, remember that's different than a subpoena. If there's a billing or insurance necessity, we give them minimal information. Some of you on here do private practice or work for a private practice agency. And if you know, billing and insurance companies request information all the time if you accept insurance. And coordinating care, as long as you have like a signed release and they're just trying to find out information about the client's services, how they're doing, and to see how it collaborates with the services that they might be providing. You always want to clarify confidentiality at the start of services, and you always document anything that you disclose and exceptions to what you can disclose, so the client's aware of that. Ethical decision-making, what comes first? So this is the ethical decision-making ladder. You recognize the dilemma, you review the code of ethics, consult with your supervisor or like legal, you examine any cultural context, and you evaluate all type of possible actions that could take place, and you always choose the most least harmful, I like to say least restrictive, and most ethical step. That's what the test is looking for. When it's saying like, what should you do? What is the most effective or most this, or what is the best? They want to make sure that you're picking what is most ethically sound or clinically sound. An example, a client tells you something serious off the record. Always clarify with them the limits of confidentiality first. Like there's no such thing as off the record. If it's something where they're threatening to hurt themselves or someone else, or any of the things we went over, then you would definitely have to move forward in the process. So when we're looking at technology and ethics, you want to have telehealth boundaries. You want to have informed consent for any virtual services, secure private setting for the client and the therapist. Emergency contacts and local resources should be established. Really important. Like I have a private practice, but most of the clients we see are virtual. I do see some in the office, but 90% of the clients I would say we're virtual. So it's important for them to know, if I see a client that's in Texas and I'm in Virginia, or I see a client that's in Maryland or somewhere, we're not there, but I should know the resources and what type of support to refer the client to, or to recommend for them to get the help they need if an emergency takes place, even if I'm not physically in that same state with them. You always want to have a backup plan for tech failures. Sometimes systems just don't work. So if it doesn't work, you always want to have something, a backup. All right, no virtual session details in documentation. Note virtual sessions. And most insurance companies require you to put like a code, like a 95 or something after the note, or the CPT code, to let them know that, hey, this session was not done in person, it was virtual. And some insurance companies pay 100% for virtual, but they charge if it's in person. So it's kind of weird when you accept insurance. There's a lot of little nuances that you have to be aware of. Electronic records, we use HIPAA compliant systems, password protected, encrypt sensitive information, and you want to back up your information on a regular basis. When we talk about social media, we address this in one of the slides. Do not accept friend requests. Use professional accounts only. Do not search for clients online unless you have clinical justification. That is a tricky one. A lot of times people are quick to Google somebody or start searching them on social media, and that is not appropriate if you do that for your client. You also want to document any social media boundary discussions and include any digital policies in your informed consent paperwork. When it comes to digital communication, use professional emails, avoid sensitive discussions. Some of this stuff is just everyday knowledge that we should know from just working with agencies, but you want to be aware as it pertains to the Code of Ethics, just in case you get a question and they're asking you how would you handle or deal with the client, and it's referring to like digital communication. All right, when it comes to using some technology, because of course we use our phones, tablets, laptops, and all that stuff, privacy comes first. We always document electronic interactions, and we use the most secure method available. You want to keep boundaries firm across all digital platforms. So like sometimes clients want to email you, sometimes they might want to text you, sometimes they want to call. Like you want to set boundaries on what's accepted and what's not. All right. So let's look at some scenarios. Self-determination versus duty to warn. So you have a competent client and they disclose they're stopping their HIV medication and they won't tell their partner. These are some of the ethical principles that come up. What are some things when you see these ethical principles, how might they apply to this situation or scenario? All right. So you always want to assess immediacy of the risk, review the state laws around HIV disclosure, explore the client's reasons. That's a big one. Sometimes we leave that out. We got to explore the client's reasons for not wanting to get you or why they're making that decision. We don't say that's crazy. Why would you want to do that? But we do want to say, making a decision, this can be very impactful to your health. Can you explain or elaborate to me what, the reason behind your decision? So they don't feel like they're being attacked or you're questioning them, but just knowing how to frame it in a way that they know how to, that they can address your concerns. And you definitely want to document those reasons and all the motivations behind why they're doing that. And you want to consult your supervisor, any type of legal team, if that's applicable. Scenario 2, cultural respect versus legal obligations. All right. So a family requests to manage child discipline within their community, but physical marks are observed. So what do? We assess immediate safety. We make the mandated report. And you also want to maintain that therapeutic alliance if possible. That's why you want to kind of explain to them like, hey, I know this is something that is very common or popular within your culture. And, we respect all cultures and things that are done. However, when it's something of this magnitude or like leaving marks or bruises or something on them, this is something that we're required by law to do. And it's something that should have been explained probably early on in the process when you go over mandated reporting. But if not, you want to make sure you do that. And then you want to document your decision-making process. So an exam tip, whenever you're doing the ethical hierarchy, you always want to look and rule out safety issues or make sure that the safety issues are being addressed. You always want to protect the client. You want to look at the ethical standards and what is best practice in a clinical sense and also in an ethical sense. And when it says best practice, normally you're looking at those evidence-based practices, modalities, and stuff that we commonly use, and then do some cultural considerations. All right, supervision. This pops up all the time. Supervision responsibilities. You want to make sure that you're meeting regularly with your supervisor, schedule clear documentation of meetings. You want to get feedback and evaluation. You also want to have like any type of professional development or support that you're needing or requesting, documented and addressed and shared with your supervisor. You want to maintain appropriate boundaries. Supervision and is all up in ethics questions all day long. So these are the things that you want to do, that you're required to do as a social worker as it pertains to supervision and what your supervisors require. All right, so these are your rights as a supervisee: to receive regular and structured supervision, have clear expectations, be evaluated fairly, due process for your concerns, and have ongoing training and development. So remember, guys, some of you are going to be in supervisory roles, and then some of you are going to be the one being supervised. So it's important to know the roles of each and how that pertains to your process. All right. You want to come prepared, keep clear records of clinical work, report any ethical issues, and know when to seek help and stay within your scope of practice. And this is just a list of some things you include in documents, which you would include pretty much in any document. But when we're pertaining to certain things of supervision, you want to make sure you do that. Any topics discussed, any ethical, legal issues, and like what type of decisions were made. All right, red flags in supervision, dual relationships with supervisees, huge issue. Boundary violations, power abuse or coercion, inadequate oversight, poor documentation, and allowing the scope of practice violations. So you're allowing this person to practice in a scope that they're not knowledgeable enough to be doing or not comfortable with or not getting the proper training and support. These are all things that should be considered when as it pertains to supervision. All right, that's that break we're going to disregard. The common exam mistakes in ethics. So these are the top 10 mistakes to avoid on the test. Rushing the act. You always want to assess before you what? It's a keyword that I always say. But what is another term for act? We always assess before we
respond, intervene.
Intervene. Yes, we assess before we intervene. Absolutely. You don't want to ignore those keywords like it was the first, next, or best. You always want to stick to the code. So when it says not your own values, let's put that in the terminology of not your job values or what you do at your agency or what your boss allows or expects of you. Because first and foremost, if your boss tells you to do something that violates the code of ethics, but it's required for the agency, what do you follow? Do you follow your code or do you follow the agency?
Your code.
Follow the code.
Your code.
You follow your code. And that's a tough one, but you follow your code. Absolutely. That's a real tough one, but you have your license to lose and your boss might not be a social worker. You know, they might be a different profession. So it's important to understand that. You break confidentiality, even with good intentions. You know, sometimes you just have to break confidentiality but when it says good intentions, this scenario means like maybe a client, this happens all the time. I have a client's parent. Like I have a client that I worked with a long time ago, current example, and he's incarcerated now. And I worked with him maybe a year and a half ago. And this mom always calls my office on his behalf and requests to speak to me and asks me over and over like information or details to try to help his case or help him out. So it's like, hey, I need a release. I can't even confirm or deny whether he was a client. You know, she has to try to call him on the phone and through it. It's really chaotic. But in that case, she's not the client. So I have to still be mindful of what I share and what I provide, even though she has good intentions, because that's his mom and she wants what's best for him and she's trying to help him out and advocate. So even in that case, we don't do it. So these are common mistakes that people read and they're like, oh man, well, you know, it is the mom and he is incarcerated. So it does make sense that who else going to get it? How else he going to do it? But that wouldn't suffice. All right, flexible boundaries, stick to clear limits, poor documentation. Basically, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. You ask for input when you're not certain about things. So that is important. A lot of questions have seek supervision in it. And to me, that's like a dead giveaway in the question. If it says seek supervision or consult your supervisor, normally that's one of the first things you'll do in situations and circumstances. So always look out for those questions. Not saying it's 1,000% right, and that's what you always do, but a majority of times that is. I would have to see a question and maybe it's something going on that's just, maybe it's something with the supervisor. So obviously you wouldn't be seeking supervision with them if they're the cause or doing something that's harmful or wrong. But in most cases, they're the ones that you go to for that support and expertise. Going beyond the scope, you refer out. If you're not qualified for it, you refer out. This comes up specifically with substance abuse clients, substance use clients, and it comes up with like eating disorder clients, things like that, because there's like a specialty and you have to have a certain skill set when you're working with clients in certain areas. All right. Strategy, make sure you always read the question carefully. Identify any ethical principles that might be in conflict. Consider cultural and legal context and apply the decision-making hierarchy. So that is like the ethical decision-making hierarchy and kind of using it. You guys, we went over in the other slides. That one's just a little bit more in depth. You don't really need all of it, but I was just letting you guys know because sometimes people just don't see what's, all that's in there. And that's something that is in there. All right. And you always want to choose the least harmful or most ethical action. All right. So let's do this quick knowledge check. I'm going to mute and give you guys, these questions are short. So I'm giving y'all 2 minutes. Go ahead and answer it. You can write the answers on a sheet of paper. We necessarily not going to go over them, but I am going to give you the answers for them on the next slide. Ready? So what did you guys get for one?
A.
You said 2. You got A.
C.
C.
Okay.
E.
And number 3?
B.
E.
And 4?
C.
Okay. And 5?
B.
Let's see. All right. Did anybody miss any? Well, I guess you don't want to say if you missed any, but anybody have a question about any of them on there? All right. Professional self-care framework. So you always want to recognize any type of impairment, like if you're emotionally exhausted, if you you're not as empathetic as you once were because you just, these are signs that you're burnt out, that you're stressed, that you're overwhelmed. And these are things you want to kind of look at. Any boundary violations, any delay in completing documentation, you notice that you're having increased errors or, getting easily frustrated. making some clinical mistakes or lacking judgment. These are the things we look for as clinicians, as social workers in our profession, because this is a high burnout profession. So we have to always be aware of signs and symptoms that we might be doing too much. I think a few weeks ago, I put in the community signs that you're overstudying or you're like doing too much as it pertains to the test. That happens a lot where you're just spending so much time and energy. Some people tell me they spend 2 hours in the morning and 2 in the evening. Like, that is a lot. And you have to be mindful of overloading your brain. And if you're doing that, then you're probably getting frustrated and short with people at work or making mistakes because you're devoting so much time and energy to the content. You're not allowing it to like sink in and really understand it and apply it. You're just getting overwhelmed by it. So just keep in mind and recognize some of these impairments that you might be faced with. Your ethical responsibilities, you always want to maintain clinical competence, recognize your own limitations, be proactive in seeking support. It's nothing wrong with social workers receiving therapy or getting support from other professionals to make sure that they're sane and they're in a good headspace. You want to document steps to make sure you're staying healthy, holding yourself accountable, and address any of these impairments that we went over above. Because if we do that, then we make sure that we're doing the bottom part, which is ensuring clients are protected and getting what they need. All right, so self-care action plan. These are just some tools to do if you do feel like you're struggling with self-care. I'm not going to go through all of them, just for you to kind of glance and see some things that you could do or implement. And these are some personal wellness strategies. This is the big one. A lot of social workers struggle with number 6, saying no when necessary. Seek therapy if needed. Like we're really good at giving people support and advice and telling them what to do, but we don't necessarily always follow those things. So we want to make sure that we're practicing what we preach as it pertains to our profession. That deals with us being overwhelmed, having a lot of self-doubt, having anxiety, like all these things are stuff that we help our clients address and overcome. But when it comes to us, we just negate to do it. And that's definitely problematic. All right. So exam tips, self-care questions, test whether you recognize impairment or whether you take protective steps, whether you understand your ethical duty to protect both yourself and your clients. That's kind of the things you'll see when it comes to self-care stuff. All right, some complex ethical dilemmas: advocating, client rights, cultural humility. These are ethic questions too, guys. I know we don't necessarily look at it as falling in ethics. You'll see an overlap in a lot of these categories tomorrow when we go over human development, as well as assessment and intervening, like all of that stuff. Some of this content overlaps. So you'll see it again and you'll hear it again, but I'm giving you this information in the context of how it presents and appears as it pertains to ethics. All right. You want to address systematic barriers. And it is systemic. Housing, healthcare, discrimination, all those type of things happen quite frequently with clients that we service. So we want to make sure that we address those things. We don't just say, oh, well, all the clients deal with housing issues. That's just a part of this neighborhood or what they deal with. We want to address it. Our job is to advocate, support, and make sure that our clients are getting the best treatment and support. You want to support your client's right to self-determination. This is a really big one. Sometimes examples would be, I've had situations, I know I said don't bring the job in, but it happens all the time when you have clients that are homeless and maybe there's a terrible storm coming in your area and you're telling them to go to a shelter, seek support, and they're like, oh, I'm gonna get in my car and ride it out. They have the right. That's self-determination. You can't force them to do a thing, even though it's harmful and something can happen. They have that self-determination, the right to decide. You also want to recognize cultural strengths and practices and challenge policies that harm vulnerable groups. So if you're working with a client or in a test question scenario, they're giving you a situation where the client's part of a vulnerable group. Let's just stick with the elderly or maybe someone that has a physical handicap or limitation or something of that nature. And there's a policy that prevents them from maybe getting the care or treatment that they need. And it's discriminatory. Like it's something that's, not helpful to them. Our job is to challenge those policies, to advocate client, to make sure that we do things to help them overcome those situations and circumstances. So we use advocacy when systems harm or limit the client. We avoid the savior mindset. So we don't want to go there and try to save each and every client, but we do want to advocate for them and make sure that they're getting what they need. And I know it's hard as social workers not to rescue everybody, but unfortunately, that's just not our overall job. We can't do it. We can't rescue everybody. All right, termination, referral, and documentation. We want to provide reasonable notice whenever we're ending services. So can someone tell me, when does termination even start when you're working with a client? When does it start?
When they've met their goals.
Right at the beginning.
At the beginning.
At the beginning.
Yep.
In the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. In the beginning. We don't abandon clients. We document why services ended, whether we attempt to engage them and continue. Maybe it's ending abruptly. We want to document that. And if the client, and then also have an aftercare plan. Like maybe the client's just saying, hey, I don't feel like I want to continue or whatever it may be. We want to make sure we have a plan in place for them. If the client stops showing up, this is a big one. We want to reach out before just terminating them altogether. And we always want to record it. Like, this social worker or this clinician or this therapist, whatever your title is, as case manager, whomever, has attempted to contact the client on maybe 8/12, 8/16, and 8/24, whatever it is, document it and just share that you were unable to get a hold of the client. That kind of protects you. All right, big one, reporting a colleague, the NASW guidance and exam strategy. So when do we report a colleague? So here's the situation. You observe or suspect unethical behavior. It's not emergency, but you just seeing some things that your coworkers doing and you like, oh, that's a little unethical. The first thing you do is address directly with the colleague. Code of Ethics requires us to confront and address our colleagues first and foremost. We always do that if it's possible or appropriate. Now, if it's unresolved and your coworker is not trying to hear what you got to say, and they don't really, your colleague is not trying to hear what you have to say, then you want to consult the supervisor or follow the agency chain of command. Now, if the behavior is harmful to a client, like a serious violation, that's when I talked about fraud, abuse, and things of that nature, you want to consult the supervisor right away. And then even after that, you might need to report it to the licensing board or authority or something like that. But normally the test question is not going to lead all the way to there. It's going to ask you, do you consult the supervisor, confront the coworker, or blah, 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 to give you those scenarios. All right. If it's any illegal or abusive conduct, you don't confront them directly. If it risks safety or legality, that's when you consult the supervisor as well, first and foremost. Fraudulent billing and ethical duty. The NASW Code of Ethics, your obligation to act is that no dishonesty or deception. So social workers must not engage in or condone fraud, dishonesty, or deception in any shape, form, or fashion. Colleague accountability, you're ethically bound to discourage, expose, and correct any type of unethical conduct, even including billing fraud. That is a big one that comes up a lot. That's why I'm emphasizing that. I've had a lot of people that say that comes up on the test, or they've seen it someplace, or struggle with that. Reporting protocol. If you suspect a violation, you report it to the supervisor or the regulatory board, especially if harm or illegality is involved. And inaccurate billing. If your coworker is billing something, it has to reflect the nature, extent, and the timing of the services provided. So anything outside of that is considered fraud. So if they're saying they're seeing a client 4 times a week and you also see the same client, and the client saying, oh, I haven't seen them for 2 months, that clearly is fraud. And that is inaccurate billing, and you need to report that to the supervisor. All right. And that is the next, that's the example basically that's being provided there. The NASW can only investigate ethical violations of its members. So keep in mind, if your colleague isn't a member of the NASW, and a lot of times your colleague might be an LPC or someone that's a resident in counseling, if they're considered like a supervisor in social work or something along those lines, you want to be mindful that you cannot report them to the board. They don't serve the same board or have the same licensing requirements and stuff that you do. So you want to keep that in mind. All right. Some final ethics exam success strategies. Remember, ethics questions test your professional judgment. Safety comes first. Documentation is your proof. Consultation protects you and the client. Cultural humility matters. Boundaries aren't optional. They are a must. And self-care is your professional responsibility. Are you studying for the LCSW or LMSW exam? Don't waste time on the wrong prep. Try my test prep program for free with a full module that gives you the real strategies, the real practice, and real results. Plus, you get access to my exclusive test prep community where you'll find support, study material, and accountability. No risk, no stress, just results. Click the link in the bio so you can get ready to win with the winning team. All right, so this is what you do when in doubt. All right, so you need to know, we talked about this, you have to know and understand like supervision, competence, advocacy, know how to apply ethical dilemmas. You have to be mindful of confidentiality limits and documentation rules. When in doubt, you always consult, refer, and you make sure you document. Okay, I'm sure you guys see that. And then I'm going to give you guys a few questions to go over. All right, so after we do these few questions, guys, we'll go over a few. I'm probably not going to go through all of them. It's about 8 of them, just for time's sake. I know I'm not going to be over 8 of them. I know a few people have to jump off. I said 8:15, so if you need to jump off, don't worry about it. It's recorded. You'll see the questions. You can just mute it and pause and just do the questions on your own, and then you can, pick back up the next time. So I know it's late. I appreciate you guys staying on. All right. And you just raise your hand when you're done with this question so I can give you the next one. So right now we have 22 people who are raising their hand. The other ones are doing other stuff, so I'm not sure if I can move on or not. All right. So in this case, number 1, the answer is B. Did anybody pick another one or have a problem with the answer?
I did. I picked D.
Contact the spouse's attorney to explain that the records are confidential and will not be released. Anybody else pick that?
I did, but I realized after doing it
that I should not have contact with any other attorney other than the clients.
Okay.
It's a reading test, so I just read that now.
Somebody said
it's reading, and I just now saw it. I should have picked B.
Okay. Got it. Want to make sure you guys understand. If you did miss it, you understand what the rationale if you needed explanation. All right, number 2. To everybody, if you did not get a chance to read 2, I'm just giving those people an opportunity to read it because we did go very fast. I just saw them hands going up and I was like, oh my God, I was getting nervous. I'm like, we got speed readers in here. So I just started moving along with everybody, but I wasn't even done reading most of the questions when I was pushing it. So I'll give you guys a few more seconds that need it. Those that said we're moving too fast, are you good on this one or do you need more time? Well, question number 2, what did you guys, can someone tell me what they got? What were they thinking for this one?
I have B.
I have B.
I said B.
I have
B.
B.
I said B.
Okay,
B.
yep, that's correct. Correct answer is B. Good. All right, 3, anybody need more time to read this one?
A.
Yes, please.
Okay, a few people said A. How many people picked B? How many people picked C? All right, so C, I was going to ask you what you picked, Nina, but you said C. Yolanda, what did you get?
Oh, I'm sorry. I picked B.
B is in Bravo? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Darkest?
I picked B.
B.
B is in Bravo? Okay. And Joseph, what did you put?
B. No, wait, I said number 3. A.
You said A. Okay, I was going to say, I heard you say A, so I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Mariam, one more person. Mariam, what did you get? Looks like we
I picked B.
B? Okay. We split all over for this one. So this one right here, the social workers at a community mental health agency learns that a colleague who is also a friend has been arriving to work smelling of alcohol and seemed disoriented during staff meetings or during team meetings. So this is your friend and your colleague, and most of you guys are saying reported directly to the agency director and human resources. So y'all going straight to the director, human resources, everything. Y'all just like throw your friend completely under the bus, like get fired. That's it. And then they're gonna be sleeping on your couch. Well, probably not. Everybody's gonna be, how did you turn your friend in? So of course it doesn't really matter that it's a friend, but I just really want us to read this content. So that's kind of like they're at a team meeting, first of all. So when this question is presented, it's like they're in a team meeting. So clearly I might not be the only one that smells them, but I'm just going to go straight to the director and the agency and human resources. I'm going to the director, then I'm going to HR and reporting them on both accounts. That's what A is saying. And then B, I'm going to speak to the colleague privately and express concern, share kind of what I've been observing in a non-judgmental way. And then C, consult with their supervisor. So going to consult with their supervisor about the agency's policy on impaired professionals without even naming the colleague. Like, hey, what do we do, hypothetically speaking, if someone was in a staff meeting and they had one too many? What do I do? How do I handle it?
Approach them.
So I'm saying that's what C says do. You're going to go to the supervisor and say, hey, I've noticed that so-and-so, well, not so-and-so, I noticed that somebody came to the job under the influence. What's kind of our policy here without naming the person? You're just kind of getting feedback from the supervisor. So a lot of you guys are picking C, a lot of you guys are picking A, and a lot of you guys are picking B. Now, reading it out in that context, we're ruling out D. It's not D, just for time's sake. I'm not going to read D. What are we going with? Tanya, what do you think?
I think it's B.
B. Well, we're gonna go with Tanya. She said B, and that's correct. So we're just gonna we're not gonna elaborate. It's B. The answer is B. And the question, remember, guys, we went over this in the PowerPoint. I went over this several times. I gave examples. I showed you guys a chart. I went back over the same question, and I did it intentionally because I know when questions come up, some people are doing other things that they might not be focused on honing in, but these are little things that bite us in the butt. It clearly says the Code of Ethics tells you to report, or not report, but to confront or consult with your coworker first, your colleague. You do that first before you jump to anything else. It doesn't say that he's working with clients. He's in a team meeting. He's under the influence. It's not saying he's driving, seeing clients. He's doing a session. So no clients at risk of being harmed. He's in a staff meeting, so he's there. Other people around. So it's something like, hey, dude, like you smell like you didn't have one too many. You know, if I can smell it, I'm sure other people can. You might want to do. Now, if he gets hostile or loud or she and say, who are you to tell me this? Then that changes the dynamic. Then you want to move from there. But this says what's the most appropriate thing. So that would be appropriate is to speak to them privately in this case.
Okay.
All right. And if you guys are not sure, it's in the previous slides, and it should also be in your little cheat sheet guides and stuff, but that's the case. The other one, number A, now report the college behavior maybe to the supervisor or confront. I can see that, but this said the agency director and HR. So that kind of let us know there was too much stuff that they were asking us to do. When it said the and you added director and HR, like we took it all the way there. So it's certain steps and protocol we want to do. Before we do that, we want to at least let our supervisor know what's happening and confront them from there. Let's see, number 4. Did anybody need more time to read this one?
I do.
I
Okay.
do.
Okay. So we have an LCSW. They're terminating with a client who successfully met all their treatment goals for depression. The last session, they give the social worker a handmade card and a $20 gift card to a local coffee shop. Client states, I can't thank you enough for everything you've done for me. The agency has a no gifts policy. The social worker's best course of action is to accept the card, but decline the gift card, explaining the agency's policy while still validating the client's gratitude. Anybody thinking that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I had A.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Or do we decline both the card and the gift to adhere to strictly the agency's policy overall?
B.
No.
No.
A.
Okay. A few people still saying A, B too. All right. What about accepting both items to avoid offending the client at a very end of a successful therapeutic relationship?
No.
No.
Gift is small.
We're setting no boundaries doing that.
Yep. So A, you would do A. You would accept the card, but say, unfortunately, I can't accept the gift card. They have a no gifts policy. So this is not only our code, but also what the job says. You can't accept gifts. So a card isn't, it's just a token of appreciation or something they're giving you. So that's a little different, but definitely